And so the objective here is just to make sure that migrants cannot cross the Mediterranean. To that end, the EU, led by Italy, which is of course right across the Mediterranean from Libya, has been training, equipping, and funding the Libyan Coast Guard to serve as a sort of proxy maritime force. So it's spent tens of millions of euros over the past few years to build it up, supplying fiberglass boats, four-wheel drive vehicles, uniforms, radios, satellite phones, all sorts of kit paid for by European taxpayers sent to this Coast Guard in Libya.
But the situation in Libya, as we've discussed on the show before, is not exactly stable. I mean, how does that work, practically speaking?
That's part of the problem here. When we talk about the Libyan Coast Guard, it sounds very official. It sounds like a military or paramilitary organization that's operating at the direction of a state. And that's not the case. That's not the case with most things in Libya at this point. This is a country where much of it is controlled by militia groups. Even state institutions, in many cases, are either controlled by or beholden to militias. There is a geographic divide between western Libya and eastern Libya. You have large ungoverned spaces, particularly in the south, where criminal gangs and people smugglers operate. And the country has been trying for months now to hold an election, which it has not been able to hold. It's been postponed because there's no constitution and there's no legal framework for voting. So this is the environment in which the so-called Libyan Coast Guard is operating. And again, like many institutions in Libya, it's really a collection of militias that are operating under the name of Libyan Coast Guard, but are operating somewhat autonomously. They run their own patrols in the Mediterranean, they operate their own detention centers, and they have just banded together under this heading of calling themselves the Coast Guard.
So this Coast Guard that sounds official in name, running its own detention centers, that's not normally how things work.
No, it's not, and it's particularly unusual to operate them the way the Libyan Coast Guard does. These are thinly veiled vehicles for extortion. People are detained there under the pretense of having violated immigration law. To secure their release, they're made to phone up their families in their home countries and have them send money. While they're in detention, they are a pool of people who are very often forced into labor. Men have been forced to work on construction sites. Women have been forced into prostitution. Of course, all of this is a money-making enterprise for the militias that operate these facilities. It's also a very dangerous environment for the migrants who are kept there. There is ample evidence from groups like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch of migrants who have been beaten